So, good afternoon, all of you. Today, I'm going to talk about neoclassicism, the second term in your module. Okay, so neoclassicism. The term neo is as a prefix you can see with the classicism as the classicism, the term classicism, which we have already come across. And classicism, the tendency, the way they approach work of art, you saw with the even with the major thinkers involved in that movement. To say, for example, mainly Plato and Aristotle. Many others to list out, but because of our being you are being UG students, you just have to have an idea about them. That will do for the time being. Okay. Now, so neoclassicism. First question is, does neoclassicism have something to do with or anything to do with the classicism? Of course, we have to draw some connections. But is it a continuation? Is it immediately after neoclassicism? Okay, some of you, anything? No, okay. Fine, let me continue. So, neoclassicism, the term neo means new. Of course, the term means new. Okay. What is that? Any doubt? No. Okay. Shall I continue? Okay, fine. So, neo, the term means new. This is the second term in that section. After classicism, we are going to discuss neoclassicism. But I have already a board image here, already written on the board and sent it to, and that's how you are getting a projection here before moving to the very file that we are using to. Okay, neoclassicism, the description you have in a PDF format, which I have already prepared. But before moving to that, let me read the first sentence, first description you get on neoclassicism. That is, 140 years after the restoration in 1660. Hope you are all, being the students of history of English literature, you have an idea about the restoration and you get the year there to be 1660. Do you have an idea about restoration now? Anyway, now you are having the third section of history paper, that is after Romantic Revival to present. Still, as your examination is not over, you may be having some contact with the prior section of that paper, and of course it is not time and you are not supposed to throw that away because you are continuously learning the second part. Okay, this is about the continuation. So 140 years after restoration, 140 years or so after the restoration. That is why I have projected the board image here without having an idea about the historical time period. And you may be having the doubt, oh, again history comes. Why? Even this itself is more than enough, and again we have to go back to history with not with every module, not with every chapter you have to, but with this description, just it is good that you have an idea about restoration. So that's why I decided to trace the, all of a sudden 1660 or restoration, to talk about that. It will be something awkward because you will be confused. So let us begin from Old English literature time period. 5th century to 10th century, if you want, you can tell it to be the Old English literature. I'm not going to talk about any of the literature tendency or anything of the time, you know. Okay, and you know about Middle English period, it extends from 10th century to 15th century. And you can see Chaucer and many other major literary figures coming out during these time periods. Then we we analyze or we trace the historical development of literature with the 16th century, 17th century. This is the way you have the discussion in your history paper as well. Right. So 16th century, please make the image clear. Yeah, 16th century, you have some, please make the image clear. All of them see that. Okay. You can see 16th century, if you talk, the first major political figure or the royal figure that comes to your mind or who comes to your mind is none other than Elizabeth I. Okay. So we are talking about a time period even later, that is 1660. That is why I gave you the time period of Elizabethan rule, that is from 1558 to 1603. And then in the 17th century, you come across some other kings like James I, Charles I. But there is a time period when you could see a very drastic shift or great shift from the royal or monarchy, rule of monarchy to a different kind of rule with Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell, who established his Commonwealth and a different kind of approach towards religion, political affairs, and England saw a very different take on its political scenario. And with Oliver Cromwell, we could see an entire shift of royalty or a very radical change or raising of or staying away of monarchy for the time being. Right. So he could rule the country, nation of England with from 1649 to 1658 in a very proper way. You could see even the monarchy was replaced, and even then many people were supporting Cromwell and he could rule peacefully. He could establish that religious doctrine. He could rule without much of a political objection or many other violations. Nothing was there. Actually, he could rule peacefully. But later, after his death, we could see Richard Cromwell, who is Oliver Cromwell's own son, who could rule only for 2 years, that is from 1658 to 1660. But there you can see a red mark after that. I have marked it in red. That means then there came a very anarchical situation because he couldn't do well as his father could. And then we could see after that chaotic situation, many other objections against this rule. Then we could see that restoration, and restoration, that is the term we have here as the restoration. After 140 years after restoration, we have neoclassicism. Not immediately with the restoration, but even after restoration's 140 year, we see the advent of neoclassicism as the term which we are going to discuss now. And what is the relevance of this restoration? With the restoration, we could see some kings. I have already marked the name of the king there, who is Charles II. Was he really good? You should be able to say. As a king, was he really good? Not at all. He couldn't do justice to the role. His life was a wayward kind. He didn't do justice to his being his position as a king, or he didn't do any justice to the ruling or the people whom he ruled. So his life in total was a kind of anarchical or some chaotic one. And as a whole, that restoration brought the literature also to be really, it took the literature, the standard of the literature also to fall down. Yes, we always talk about a kind of, there is a saying, restoration as a as a political event, it didn't bring something of positive but very negative impact in the cultural, political and literary context of Britain. Very anarchical situation because the king was already leading a very wayward life. He was very luxurious. He was leading luxurious life, very immoral life. So the literature also, You know, with the Cromwell and Puritanism, they closed down the theatres. They didn't want the people to be indulged in pleasure. We see a kind of repetition of history with it. See, if you talk about Plato, we saw the same. In England, during the time period of Cromwell, we see the same kind of strictness. But with the restoration, what happened was the king was of a very funny kind, or he was leading a very silly life, like silly, not silly in the level of simplicity, but very wayward life with a lot of pleasure. He was using almost all the royal wealth for his own private pleasures. So he couldn't do justice to his subjects as a king or as a ruler. And then we talk here about neoclassicism as 140 years after. So let us come back to after 1660 to 1665, the same Charles II ruled and many other kings followed. But in 18th century, that is, we have to trace after 1660. If I talk about 1660 plus 140, we have to trace a year like 1760 to 1820. And we mark it as the age of sensibility. That is, after restoration with many other wayward kings, means very the kings who lacked any morality or seriousness, but later we come back to age of sensibility. That means literature, the people were trying to get back the standard of literature, and there we begin neoclassicism. That means again we are going back to the strict rules in literature. We are going back to high morals in literature. In between many points and many historical kings and queens, the rules, political context, we could see the very wayward kind of literature as well. You know about that kind of literature. Can anyone say about that? The stage, everything getting much very explicit use of pleasure, other love scenes, everything getting portrayed on the stage, and you say that kind of a theater, you have a particular term for that kind of a theater. Can anyone say, can anyone type at least what is the term for that? I will get a clue for some of the way of the world. William Congreve is one of the writers of that kind. Any idea? Any clue? Any idea? I have given you the clue. No idea. Later they tried it too. After that they went on to bring back the strictness of stage, art, portrayal, everything. And there we start with the restoration. 140 years after restoration, we have the age of sensibility. Then you please project that PDF file right now. Okay. Let us connect neoclassicism and age of sensibility, and hope you have an idea about the literary time period and the political scenario of England in general. Then the second idea that comes in connection with the neoclassicism is reaction against Renaissance view. So this is important that you have an idea about Renaissance. What is Renaissance? What is the basic concept of Renaissance? That is, man as enthusiastic, optimistic with infinite potential. Renaissance view of man is really something really beyond natural thinking. That means man is capable of anything. That is why every time even in literature, we have the Renaissance characters to be always enthusiastic. They have a quest for knowledge. At least you may have an idea about Dr. Faustus. You know, even after achieving a degree, even after achieving a medical degree, he is not satisfied. Just think about our situation. Even we are fed up with taking a degree. But what about that man? He, after learning for this much years, after getting all the degree, all the medical professional degree and the established profession as a doctor, he is not satisfied. Still, he is in search of new knowledge. And that is the epitome, like a portrayal of a Renaissance man. And this Renaissance spirit, Renaissance view of man as very enthusiastic and optimistic and capable of anything. What do you mean by potential? The term potential means capable of anything and everything. There is no limit for their scope and skill. So this is the way Renaissance time portrayed human beings, or they are highly capable and they should not be limited in their art or literature or any other way, any other context where they can project their skills or they can explore their skills. This was the way Renaissance projected human beings in general, or man in general. Okay, but this neoclassicism, you know, this is almost new classicism. That means, of course, this will be rule oriented, or some were fascinated with the rule and strictness. So what is the problem with giving all the provision for human beings to pursue their pleasures, pursue their skills? Then the rule based controlling will not be possible. You tell that, okay, you are capable of everything, you should be optimistic and you do whatever you want to. There will not be any rule that can bring a control over you. But classicism or neoclassicism, these rule-bound people want a control over any human being, any human subject in their society. So they wanted to tell that not at all like that. Man is imperfect. In the third line you can see neoclassicism emphasizing man to be imperfect. It is not at all this Renaissance idiots tell. It's not like that. You are imperfect, man. You have your own limitations. So limit yourself and write only limited things. Write only in a controlled way. Create writings, create materials, create art forms only in a controlled way. We have already some rules here, and you should produce or create literature only according to the rule. You stick to the rules. So in one way or other, it is in a very distorted manner. They tell that no, you are not supposed to go always against the rules, or as per your skill allows. You should have a control over your skills as well. That's why they wanted to tell neoclassicism. We are reminded of classic masters, the thinkers who lived even centuries before. Still that the trace is still here. We know, even if you talk about, even nowadays, we talk about all this modernization, everything. But still now we can see people who are still sticking on to the rules, who are really orthodox, who never can appreciate anything like freedom or any other concepts of that new concepts of the kind. So we know every time, every literary time period, every historical time period bring every kind of human being. You cannot tell that, yeah, this is modern time and no other orthodox people, no people with orthodox thinking lives in this way, in this society. No, it's not that way. Every time it is a mixture. And just think, classicism, you know the time period when Plato and Aristotle lived. And now it is even it is not even the same country. This is England. We are now talking about England in general. Okay. Or the world in general, if you want to, as we are talking about literary criticism, it is not completely in one. We do not have to set only it in one country. It's about Greek, it is about English. No, every time we have the influence all across the world. Okay, so here as a whole, but it is after years and centuries we come back to neoclassicism. That's why I told you, you get classicism and then next term that we teach you may be neoclassicism. But that doesn't mean that classicism came in 4th century and neoclassicism came in the 6th century or 5th century. No, it is now we are talking about the 17th or 18th century. Centuries are the same in every nation, every geographical spaces, but the people who lived during that time and even after this much centuries, we see the same trace and same attitude towards human beings and art in general. Okay, so man as imperfect. That is the first point at which they wanted to emphasize, and they wanted to bring back the rule and restrictions to art and other realms of creativity. Okay, now then what is the emphasis? Next point you can see there to be emphasis on order. Did you see it somewhere? Of course, we came across it in classicism with Plato and Aristotle as well. We saw this order, reason. What do you mean by reason there? Is it the usual reason we talk about? What is the reason for you are being late? It's not the reason. It's here. It is about the thinking power. Only after thinking, much thinking, you should write. Only after much thinking, even thinking plus the consequence, thinking about the consequence, you should produce an art form. So this is the way classicism wanted to, and the same thing happens with the neoclassicism, a new kind of classicism. That's all. And as it is after centuries, we call it to be neoclassicism. Otherwise, it is okay, fine. Classicism will do for this kind of an attitude. Okay. Reason, restraint. Again, the same term we came across in classicism. Restraint, common sense. So, a creative person may not be always sticking on to common sense. If every writer sticks on to common sense, then there is nothing called fancy literature, fancy fantasy, or any other kind of literature may not be possible, will never be possible with this common sense, sticking on to common sense in your writings. And conservation means, you know how conservative once we are really sticking on to many labels like philosophical, economic, religious, political. You can see the terms there. Religion. Hey, you make the presentation clear. Make it stay there. That screen is really needed. Yeah, emphasis on this. And conservative. You talk about conservative. Every person who is following religion, politics is not a conservative. But when it goes beyond a limit of that, see, you never can accept any other religion, intolerance towards other political parties, other religious sectors, economic, philosophy. See, then you become conservative. And these people want this to be really conservative. Beyond our idea, you should not go. This is the way they wanted to emphasize this order. And that is not at all really preferable as stance. But even, you just see, even after centuries, the same kind of rigidity getting followed by the set of politics, art, culture, literature. Everywhere we can see the same rule coming back. Okay. Then we see some 5 points. The first one, strong traditionalism. What do we mean by traditionalism? What do we mean? Tradition is a term which is used positively and negatively as per your subjective understanding. That means if you are a person who is really fond of traditional way of dressing, way of living, then that traditionalism is so positive for you. But that term will be really negative and harassing if you are a very modern person, a person who wants to appreciate change. Traditional people cannot even appreciate change, at least in the case of dressing, at least even in the mode of food or any other art forms. They cannot appreciate any something new. That's why strong traditionalism is sometimes problematic, especially when you talk about art. The context of art, it is really problematic. Okay, traditionalism. Just the second point, you see, first point with the neoclassicism is strong traditionalism, not just very silly kind of or very normal way of sticking on to tradition or traditionalism, but strong kind of art forms. Yes, if I get you this kind of a role, you should produce, you should write in that way. If it is with this kind of a meter, you should stick on to that meter itself. If you have to use this, this much act for writing this play, yeah, that should be the number of acts, no exceeding of that limit. So this is the way you can stick on to is traditionalism, and that becomes really strong in that regard. There is no freedom for the writer to express his or her own self. Okay, then second point you can see there to be strove for correction. What do you mean strove? S-T-R-O-V-E, strove. Strove is the V2 form of past form of strive. S-T-R-I-V-E, strive. Means, striving means you are trying, you are attempting, you are craving for something. That is, you are trying to get something. And what do they try to get? Neoclassicism tries to get correction. Means every time they wanted to be so precise. Every time they wanted to be very precise and strict in observing the language rules, rules of composition. They wanted it to be intact always. They never could afford any kind of errors in language use. Okay, so that is what you mean by strove for correction. And stylistic decorum. What do you mean by decorum? Decorum, the term you already know. With the classicism, we have already come across the term. And strove for this decorum. Stylistic decorum. That means in the style of using a language and the writing style, they wanted that proportion, and they wanted every time to stick on to the rule of composition. No other freedom. As a whole, if you want to talk, the freedom of expression and freedom of composition, that those were denied like anything. Okay, so this is the way the second point gets an explanation in the case of neoclassicism. Okay. So with the neoclassicism, let me come to the third point. Human beings as the primary subject matter of literature and poetry, both instruction and pleasure, and art for humanity's sake. These are the 3 points we have to describe in that part. Let me read that sentence itself. Human beings were regarded as the primary subject matter of the major forms of literature. Poetry was held to be an imitation of life, a mirror held up to nature, that was designed to provide both instruction and pleasure to its readers. Art for humanity's sake was the central ideal of neoclassic humanism. So they wanted the human beings themselves to be the primary subject matter of literature. Then what else can be the primary subject matter of literature? As when we talk about that, all of a sudden you may not be getting an idea. But we have different kinds of subject matter. Primary subject matter may not be human beings always. Slumdog Millionaire, the movie. Once it is as a novel, then it is not the human beings in that novel or movie do get importance. It is it's not human beings, but the dogs portrayed are getting importance. But they want, this neoclassic people wanted, those are the very modern art, the new art. But here neoclassicism wanted human beings themselves to be the primary subject matter. Okay, let me do one thing. Let me continue. So this primary subject matter to be human beings of a very better kind, as Plato and Aristotle wanted it to be. Not at all like some thieves or any other criminals. They wanted the human subjects to be holding some values that are something that can teach you something. That is, just see the character and see their morality. That is, they are really good. They are really better as human beings. So let us see them as a model at least. This kind of a thought should be evoked in us if you view those human beings. And that kind of characters were only appreciated in these portrayals, or neoclassicism wanted these human beings as the primary subject matter. It doesn't mean that you are giving importance to human beings, but the subject matter, they didn't want it to be some animals or any other robots or no, just think about Shaktiman. He's not a human being, he's a supernatural character. And that is not needed that kind of portrayals are not appreciated by neoclassicism. They wanted, even if it is a king or a person who is not at all very well placed in the society or very rich or nothing, that is not the way. It is about human beings as such as portrayed. Okay, then that what is the next point? That is subject matter of literature, poetry for both instruction and pleasure. There is a little bit of addition, that is okay, pleasure also can be afforded. In the classic level, it was never, pleasure should not be there at all. No pleasure, nothing, only morality. Every time it should be teaching. Everything it should be didactic. Literature or whatever it may be, it should be didactic or praising the gods or the good or somewhere the wealthy human beings like royal people. You can praise in your literature. You can praise such people in your literature or gods in your literature, or you can stick on to the very strict way of portraying of no pleasure at all. But here it's okay, pleasure can be there, but that should not go beyond a limit. Every time it is conditions applied. Whether classicism or neoclassicism, every time it is almost like conditions applied. Okay, so pleasure as a term is added there. That is the major difference, if you want, major or minor difference if you want to tell, because the pleasure that can be afforded as per their view is not that great. That's not really to the peak kind of pleasure they talk about. Okay, and what is art for humanity's sake? Now, in the modern time, we have art for art's sake. That means art is for art's sake. You don't have to worry about the morality. You don't have to be worried about the way your moral being affected by art. That's why we tell. We always have the tendency to say, it's just a film. Why are you giving too much importance to that? And the same way, you have art for humanity's sake. That means it is for the well-being of the humanity. No, you don't go back to humanism. So I'm talking about the same thing. Keep the file there. Art for humanity's sake means art for the well-being of human beings. Okay. And the fourth one, common experiences, thoughts, feelings and tastes. That means a creative person may not be having the very common experiences you see with the majority of people around you. Their style is different. Their lifestyle is different. Their thoughts are different. Their feelings and tastes are different. You may always think they are always dangerously different. Their approach towards literature, approach towards life, every social and cultural situation they come across, they have a very liberal, it's not a claim, but that is the way we view creative people. Okay, and these common experiences are not so common for these kind of creative mindsets, and they should be limited. Otherwise, this rule-bound limitations may not be possible or will not be possible with the classicism or neoclassicism. So they wanted to restrict everything from the very budding time itself. They wanted to set these as the rules against their going for freedom of expression. That's why common experience, you project, you portray, that is fine. But if you project your views, the very liberal view or individual freedom and all, many people will be following you, and then the whole of morality and strictness of the society will be affected. Okay, then the last point, human beings as limited agents and only with the limited goals. They wanted human beings to have only limited goals. They are very limited agents. Your capability is limited. You are not that talented. This is the way they wanted to limit the creative mindsets. Is it possible nowadays? No, you have different multiple intellectuals. That's why we have different creative people coming and fighting even against the certain new tendencies, new amendments in our nation, in our country. You might have seen people, the creative people, cultural, from different cultural and literature departments coming and raising their voice against the injustices against, say for example, if it is about the recent attack or the murder of a black person on behalf of his color, he was killed. You saw the brutality. And if it is about the amendment, see sometimes some undesirable amendments in our constitution, we know how many people raised their voice. So this is the way we have the kind of human intelligentsia working, that is, they are not rule bound. But that time, during this time, that was really possible, and these people could do this or do with these restrictions and attack the human pride. That means actually it is an attack on the human pride. There is no individuality, there is no freedom. Even if you are with a lot of ideas, a lot of new themes, these people, the ruling sector wanted you to write down in a particular way. The ruling sector wanted you to create literature of a very unanimous kind. Just think about the pride of the people getting affected. What do you mean by pride? Pride is the positive idea any person holds about himself or herself. We see, pride is the way we have a very positive regard of ourselves, and that is attacked with these kinds of restrictions. And they need to submit to cosmic order. What do you mean by this cosmic order? The universal order. They tell that everything is decided by the cosmic order, the other natural powers. See, you are not supposed to experiment with your skill as such, and limits upon freedom. With all this, the impact is the limits upon freedom, nothing more than nothing less than that. It is all the individual freedom, the concept of freedom, everything is at stake when you have this neoclassic tendency ruling over the creative mindsets. So just see how long does it take to explain one term, the whole 1 hour we have taken. You saw the point. And this is how the idea, basic understanding is really necessary in the case of these movements. Later when we come across other movements, this will be again going to, some are really simple, but some need your basic understanding first. Otherwise it will be like parroting. You are learning just something from the note and will not be having anything. But now at least you have an idea. After classicism, we learn neoclassicism and how these are connected, and how both are well versed and highly skilled in restricting the freedom of the individual and the thinking mindsets. So that's all with this particular section today.